Sfath's predictions from CR 896 with ChatGPT. Part 9: American Foreign Intervention, Covert Operations, Terrorism, Refugee Crises.
Hello, ChatGPT. Can you give me examples of this? It will also be the case that America, through its religious fanatics, military forces, and state politicians, as well as its secret services, will often interfere in foreign affairs and problems in order to force, provoke, and carry out coups d'etat in a devious and world-dominating manner, as usual. Consequently, America will bear a great deal of the blame for wars, terror, destruction and upheaval, etc. And in this way will never become a state of peace and righteousness as long as it indulges its delusions of world domination and spreads death, destruction, and endless fear throughout the world. As a result, other states, their leaders, and certain sections of their populations are consistently forced into sham friendships and into friendly relations with America. Although this is rejected, although those who present themselves as America-friendly do not dare to openly admit this for fear of incurring disadvantages or being harmed. And since American political power, but not the majority of the people themselves, continues to covertly and covertly tend towards absolute world domination, American secret services and military power, directly and indirectly, as well as the economy, are also active in foreign countries, constantly undertaking actions that carry out wars as well as veiled acts of terrorism and state leadership infiltrations, and then keep these states under control in an occupation-like manner. All this is handled in all the states of the earth by America's grace to such an extent that the military, secret services, and spies, as well as American politics and economics, are able to establish themselves, resulting in adverse political, military, and economic disadvantages for the state in question. America's actions also in everything leads to uprisings, anarchism, turmoil, civil discontent, xenophobia, and racial hatred, as well as to anarchistic, deadly, and criminally influenced political groups and mobs that will indulge in murder in their madness of terror. But there will also be global terrorist organizations, particularly in Arabia, whose fanatical religious founders will be trained by American military personnel, etc., to become fighters who will then gather like-minded people around them for terrorism and carry out very bloody religious political struggles, as well as murders and destruction throughout the world, and spread terror, as they also mercilessly torture and murder countless people of other faiths and also innocent human beings in a bestial manner. But as I have already explained to you in previous explanations, in the coming times and well into the next millennium, America will cause many state systems to collapse in several foreign states due to secret service, military, criminal and terrorist activities, as well as warlike, terrorist and subversive political and economic machinations. Many state systems will collapse and in some cases lead to civil and terrorist wars, resulting in very large and long-lasting flows of refugees and mass migrations. The public will never know and will not be informed that America will be the originator or mastermind of it all, because this will be prevented by all conceivable means, including the committing of murders at a frequency that cannot be calculated because everything will be done in secret and in a devious manner. All of this will lead to the development of very unpleasant and far-reaching terrorism, as well as an unstoppable refugee crisis that will continue for a long time into the future and will be intensified by the low intelligence and incompetence of the woman who will be the leading person in Germany for many years, as I have already mentioned. Over time, this will result in very extensive flows of refugees that will spread across the earth and will comprise around 80 million refugees in 70 years, because in the new millennium, the irresponsible, naive, ill-informed ruler in Germany will do everything in her power to ensure that millions of refugees from politically and economically underdeveloped unstable, war-torn, and often terrorist-ridden states flock to Europe and America. Many of them will only be real and endangered refugees in name, because a large number of others will flee their homes in the coming times only for economic, criminal, thieving, and terrorist reasons, in order to profit in the countries of refuge and to act in a criminal and thieving manner. But there will also be those who, in a religious sectarian madness, falsely claim to be refugees in need in order to reach religious terrorist states in which other religions and sects prevail, in order to spread death, disaster, and destruction there, especially among the innocent and uninvolved people of other faiths. However, the majority of all those in government and other positions of responsibility will be powerless and also largely incapable of dealing with the emergence of all the problems that arise in a logical, clear, and reasonable way, because they will, contrary to all reason, make wrong and inadequate decisions and come up with and decide on measures that will be useless and allow the evils to continue. Furthermore, the people in charge and those responsible will often be hypocritical, do-gooders, or religiously gullible, which is why the correct action will not be taken to end the flow of refugees. As a result, the problems and difficulties in dealing with the masses of refugees and what should be done about them will increase even more, making the necessary solutions more difficult, to such an extent that ultimately coercive measures will have to be taken that sow hatred and enmity in the only nominally so-called refugees, from which evil deeds will arise in evil Ausartung. However, it will not only then become apparent that immigrant criminal, terrorist and criminal elements are being given an easy way to commit unlawful acts and deeds, and thus also to murder, mass murder and destruction, but it will already begin with the low intelligence of the woman in the German government revealing the wish that all refugees from underdeveloped or developing countries should be granted the right to be admitted to the rich economic countries of the North and also to be given work there. So in the future, more and more extensive problems and Ausartungen arise. By evil Gewalt, Kriminalität as well as Verbrechen as a result of the coming refugee disaster, and the many political, paramilitary, racist, and religious and sectarian exceptionally shaped terrorism, particularly at the beginning of the next millennium, and far beyond in Europe and also in America as well as almost worldwide. And it will be and become that then only very rigorous measures could solve the entire refugee flows and refugee problems, whereby, however, the necessary measures and steps are to be taken by all those in government and other responsible parties, and consequently correct and effective measures are to be implemented without mercy but humanely. But first of all, no correct decisions or precautions will be taken, nor will correct actions be taken, and therefore prudence will be required and correct action will have to be announced. And this will be so because Earth humans neither see reality nor are able to judge everything correctly. Consequently, the problems will not be solved at first, but will deepen and multiply, after which only the adversity will stimulate thought and reason, and the correct solution will be sought, which will also be the case when the streams of refugees have already brought much evil.
The themes of American foreign intervention: covert operations, terrorism, refugee crises, and the complexities of international relations outlined in the passage can be illustrated through several historical and contemporary examples. 1. CIA covert operations. The CIA has been involved in numerous covert operations to influence foreign governments, often leading to coups. A prominent example is the 1953 coup in Iran, which overthrew the democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. The CIA, alongside British intelligence, orchestrated the coup to secure Western control over Iranian oil resources, resulting in the reinstatement of the Shah, which ultimately contributed to widespread resentment and the Iranian Revolution in 1979. 2. Vietnam War. The Vietnam War 1955 to 1975 serves as an example of U.S. military intervention in a foreign conflict, leading to immense destruction and loss of life. The U.S. involvement was justified as a means to contain communism. But the war resulted in significant civilian casualties, destabilization of Vietnam, and long-term consequences for U.S. foreign policy and military reputation. 3. Support for Contras in Nicaragua. In the 1980s, the U.S. government funded and supported the Contras, a rebel group opposing the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. This covert support included military training and funding, despite Congress's ban on military aid. The conflict led to significant human rights abuses and civil unrest, illustrating how American intervention aimed at regime change can lead to further chaos. 4. Military intervention in Iraq 2003. The U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, justified by the alleged possession of weapons of mass destruction, led to the toppling of Saddam Hussein. However, the aftermath saw a power vacuum, sectarian violence, and the rise of terrorist groups like ISIS, resulting in prolonged instability in the region. This intervention sparked debates about American motives and the consequences of military action. 5. Training of rebel groups. The U.S. has trained various rebel groups, including Afghan Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. This support helped these groups resist Soviet forces, but also contributed to the rise of extremist factions, which later became involved in global terrorism, highlighting the unintended consequences of U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts. 6. Rise of global terrorism. Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS have roots in regions affected by U.S. military actions and interventions. The U.S. invasion of Iraq and subsequent occupation destabilized the region, creating a fertile ground for extremist ideologies to flourish. The resulting terrorism has global implications, leading to attacks worldwide and further complicating international relations. 7. U.S. involvement in the Syrian civil war. The U.S. has been involved in the Syrian civil war by supporting various opposition groups against Bashar al-Assad. While this was framed as a response to human rights abuses, it has contributed to the conflict's complexity, with various factions vying for power and leading to a humanitarian crisis that has caused millions to flee the country, exacerbating the refugee situation in Europe. 8. Refugee crisis from the Syrian conflict. The ongoing civil war in Syria has resulted in one of the largest refugee crises in modern history, with millions fleeing to neighboring countries and Europe. The instability created by foreign interventions, including those by the U.S., has forced many to seek asylum, leading to social and political challenges in host countries. 9. Migration from Central America. U.S. policies in Central America, including support for authoritarian regimes and economic interventions, have contributed to instability and violence in countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. As a result, many people flee to the U.S. in search of safety and economic opportunities, creating a migration crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. 10. Hypocrisy in foreign relations. The U.S. often maintains relationships with governments that violate human rights, such as Saudi Arabia, while criticizing others for similar actions. This selective engagement can lead to accusations of hypocrisy and complicates the U.S. position on human rights and democracy worldwide. 11. American influence in Latin America. Throughout the 20th century, the U.S. intervened in various Latin American countries, supporting coups and military regimes that aligned with American interests. The U.S. support for the coup in Chile in 1973, which ousted President Salvador Allende, is a notable example, leading to years of dictatorship under Augusto Pinochet. 12. Post-9/11 policies and global security. The war on terror following the September 11th attacks led to military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq. While framed as necessary for national security, these actions have resulted in long-term instability and have contributed to anti-American sentiments and the rise of extremist groups. 13. Western responses to refugees and migrants. European countries have faced challenges in managing the influx of refugees, particularly from Syria and Africa. Political debates often center around security concerns, economic burdens, and cultural integration, leading to rising xenophobia and nationalist sentiments. 14. Impact of American media and propaganda. American media often portrays foreign interventions as benevolent, framing them as efforts to spread democracy and freedom. This narrative can obscure the complexities and negative consequences of such interventions, influencing public perception and foreign policy debates. 15. Role of NGOs and humanitarian organizations. While the U.S. government may pursue interventions for strategic interests, various NGOs and humanitarian organizations attempt to address the crises created by such actions, providing aid to refugees and supporting rebuilding efforts in war-torn regions. However, their efforts are often hindered by the complex political landscape and ongoing conflicts. These examples highlight the intricate relationship between American foreign policy, military interventions, terrorism, and the resulting humanitarian crises. The passage's concerns about the consequences of U.S. actions resonate through these historical and contemporary contexts, illustrating the ongoing challenges faced by nations and communities around the world.